The idea of a cycle of hatred comes up many times in Fullmetal Alchemist. It's easy to define and understand. When someone hurts another person, that person may in turn hurt more people, and so on. In the end, it creates a perpetual cycle of hate creating more hate. Of course, if this cycle continues, everyone will lose and suffer. The original Fullmetal Alchemist manga and Brotherhood are concerned with having the audience comprehend this cycle. From there, the story deconstructs the logic that underlies it, showing how it's built on faulty reasoning. Afterward, the cycle is reconstructed into something far better. To put it another way, the story provides other options for how people can treat one another or react to the atrocities that some people commit. This thematic idea, the idea that revenge is bad and reconciliation is good, is by no means unique. In fact, it's very common. But Fullmetal Alchemist manages to stand out by approaching this idea from multiple angles, by showing how crimes against humanity are committed, how people can fight back against a system of violence, and how a new system may be able to take its place. Of course, this all needs to start with comprehension. "I was just doing my job" is an incredibly loaded phrase. With these 6 simple words, it's possible to thrust responsibility for one's actions onto an authority figure or system. In doing so, one can grapple with guilt and shame by claiming that they aren't guilty, that they never even did anything wrong. Because this way, their actions aren't a byproduct of their decision-making. Instead, they're a byproduct of someone else's decision-making. And while it's a defense that's frequently used in people's day-to-day lives, it's also been used in an attempt to justify truly atrocious acts of violence on a widespread scale. Of course, part of the reason people use this defense is that if other people buy the argument, they may be able to avoid negative consequences. But I think there's another, deeper reason. For most people, it's hard to accept that they played a part in something truly horrible, that they had a massive negative impact on the world, on other people, that they ruined and even ended lives. Wouldn't it be easier to say that it wasn't their fault? That they didn't really do anything wrong themselves, that they were just following orders? I think it would be. Because it's hard to accept that sometimes there's no going back, that there's no fixing the mistake you made. At the core of Fullmetal Alchemist's Ishvalan War of Extermination, there's this question of why. Why are so many people dead? Why is there such widespread destruction? Why does the fighting keep going? Basically, why did it turn out this way? Many characters have their own answers to these questions, but Kimblee's and Hughes' takes are the most immediately revealing. In Kimblee's mind, they're doing it because that's the job. That's what soldiers do. They perform the task given to them by the leader of the military. In his mind, it's strange that people can't accept that. However, everything Kimblee says here is based on an assumption. The assumption that this is the job. However, Mustang and other characters believe that their job is to protect people. Of course, this answer is relatively vague and open to interpretation. After all, what does it exactly mean to protect people? Following orders is relatively straightforward, especially when compared with asking what it means to protect. It could be argued that all this killing in the long run is the way to protect certain people, even to the great detriment and destruction of others. Even so, many of these characters doubt that. And rightfully so, because they see the Ishvalan people as, well, people, and as part of the country they've sworn to protect. Yet, even these people carry forward, and they follow orders. Hughes' reason that he keeps on fighting is shorter and simpler than Kimblee's, but just as important. I don't want to die. That's it. Words of a man who fears for his own life, and who has something he still wants to live for. Hughes' words are also based on an assumption, though. The assumption that the way out of this is to keep fighting. However, there are other options, and the story makes that clear. In chapter 60 of the manga, we're introduced to Brigadier General Fessler. Despite his position, Fessler is, above all else, incompetent. He sends soldiers to die on the battlefield and acts like that's something beautiful. Even in the brief time we see him, it's clear that his recklessness is leading to the deaths of many Amestrian soldiers. After both sides have suffered heavy losses and Armstrong has fled from the battlefield, Basgran comes in to serve as a human weapon in his place. Eventually, the Ishvalans here surrender, offering up the highest man in charge of the Ishvalan religion to the army. This man hopes to trade his life for the life of his people. Fessler, however, demands that the soldiers exterminate the rest of the Ishvalans here, regardless of their surrender. But Basgran kills him instead, and the soldiers agree to go under his command. Here, Fessler's recklessness and his obvious lack of care for human life lands him in an early grave, killed by one of his own soldiers. From there, the Ishvalan leader goes to give himself up to Bradley. Bradley's response? Well, he insults the Ishvalan people and their religion, but more importantly, he says no. He refuses this opportunity for peace and carries out the same position that Fessler was killed for. More will die, including those in the army, and there will be no peace. Despite the option for peace being there, the fighting will continue. If the soldiers turned against Fessler, why don't they turn against Bradley? Maybe it's out of fear. Maybe it's out of a sense of duty. Either way, from this moment forward, it's clear that Bradley is a danger to everyone. Just like Fessler, he would have soldiers charge forward, killing their fellow citizens as though it's a matter of course and dying in combat themselves. Before, blaming this destruction on a job was already questionable. But from here, it's impossible. There was a clear opportunity for peace, for respite, but the leader said no and the soldiers fell in line to follow that command. No matter how hard it is, these soldiers need to take some personal responsibility. The soldiers may tell themselves that it's either that they kill the Ishvalans or die themselves. But what about this corrupt command? Why must these orders be obeyed, no matter how unreasonable or destructive? Well, authority is a powerful thing, and fear is too. Sure, following orders will lead to terrible things, that much is clear. But what about the alternative? What happens if the soldiers attempt to overthrow Bradley? What happens if they disregard orders? Will they get to go home to their families? Will their loved ones suffer or be harmed by a corrupt government? Will they be killed by their comrades? One choice leads to certain destruction, but the other one leads to an unknown. And in the moment, that unknown can be even more frightening than certain destruction. Even so, there was still a choice: to follow orders or not follow orders. Disobeyed orders may come with horrible consequences, but following them will too. People on both sides of this conflict die. The military even gets to the point where Kimberly is sent to kill the Rockbells because they're treating Ishvalans. Their operation is small, they're running out of medicine, they're barely scraping by, and still, they need to be killed because they offer resistance, because they dare to step outside the rigid boundaries of this violent edict to kill all Ishvalans. The corruption of the government won't just stop because the soldiers follow orders. In fact, their compliance will only feed the corruption. And eventually, that corruption is liable to hurt many of them all the same. But accepting responsibility isn't easy because that means you're guilty. And guilt can destroy you. Dr. Knox is one of the characters who's destroyed by guilt. During the war, he moved from treating live people to dealing with dead bodies. Specifically, he examined and dissected the bodies of Ishvalans in order to research the effects pain and, in particular, burns had on them. Racked by guilt, he sees himself as unfit to go back and treat people. Instead, he continues to work on dead bodies. Sometimes he would have night terrors, and when his wife would wake him, he would mistake her for an enemy. He attacked her, almost killing her, and they couldn't stay together. This way, the home that Dr. Knox fought to protect, that many of these soldiers fought to protect, is lost all the same. Knox doesn't even see himself as worthy of having a cup of coffee with his family, asking God if it's really okay for a guy like him to happily drink it with them. Dr. Knox's son, however, berates his father for his actions. He says, even though you can save someone's life because you're scared, you throw it aside. Not doing anything is the coward's way out. And though we don't get to see what exactly Dr. Knox does from here, we do get to see what a somewhat similar character does. Dr. Marco. Dr. Marco, like Dr. Knox, worked with the Amestrian military and performed various experiments using Ishvalans. Through these experiments, he was able to create a philosopher's stone. In turn, those stones were used to make the state alchemists even more powerful and to destroy the Ishvalan people. However, he fled the military with a stone and used it to treat people in a small town. It's clear that he is making some attempt to do the right thing from here on out, even if what he does now will never be able to change what he already did. Still, like Knox, he's running away. He left the military with his research. He didn't fight the system that allowed a man like him to do what he did. Later, however, he joins up with many of the heroes in their quest to overthrow the government and defeat the homunculi. Using his knowledge of alchemy, he's even able to get the upper hand against envy and assist in his capture. Here we see that guilt can drive people forward, that the sense of responsibility that comes along with it can help people to do the right thing from here on out. Mustang, Armstrong, Hawkeye, and many others all stand as examples of this. Each of them feels that, some way or another, they failed. whether that be by following unreasonable orders or by simply fleeing the battlefield. Regardless, they know they can't run because without larger change, there will be more people like them down the line. More human weapons charging into battle just following orders. Mustang and Armstrong even discussed their worries that something like that could happen to Ed. But if the system changes, if such a thing weren't allowed to happen in the first place, well, then there's more of a hope for a brighter future. It's important to take personal responsibility, but it's also important to recognize that this could happen again, that others could make the same decisions. As such, these characters don't only take responsibility for their own actions, they take responsibility for the future as well. The story's message is clear. This is the right thing to do. One can't avert their eyes from the sins they've committed. They must accept responsibility and push forward to make the world a better place. Even if they can never change the past, they need to do what they can now. After all, running away will do nothing to break the cycle of hatred or stop further acts of violence. And that all sounds good. But what happens when you're on the other side? Through Scar, we get to see the other side of the Ishvalan War of extermination. The side of someone who had their family, friends, and way of life ripped away from them. The side of someone who has to live with the survivor's guilt of having their world collapse around them and somehow coming out alive. Where other characters in the series are looking towards the future, Scar can't tear his eyes away from the past. To him, there isn't any future worth considering because so much was already taken from him. Besides, in his mind, Amestris doesn't even deserve a future after what they've done. It'd be better to burn it all to the ground than to allow such a corrupt nation to continue to exist or even potentially thrive. However, Scar's perspective isn't only shaped by the end result of the war. During the war, he argues that Ishval should stay insular, that they never should have worked with Amestris at large, that his brother shouldn't be studying alchemy, and so on. All in all, in times of trouble, Scar appeals to tradition. As such, he outright rejects other perspectives and new ideas. But the world is more connected than Scar thinks, and actions have consequences he can't comprehend. For example, his killing of state alchemists could lead to surviving Ishvalans being discriminated against in even worse ways. By extension, he could end up playing a large role in permanently dismantling the culture he so badly wanted to protect. Of course, this is only speculation, but his actions hurt Ishval in concrete ways too. After all, when Ed and Al are trying to understand the truth behind the truth, they want to go talk with Boss Grund, who is in charge of Laboratory 5's research. Unfortunately, Scar already killed him though. Through him, Ed and Al could have learned more about the Philosopher's Stones and eventually about the treatment of Ishvalan people during the war. Scar didn't mean to, but he's assisted in covering up horrible crimes against humanity, and covering up the crime against his people. But Scar wouldn't think on this level for one simple reason. He believes that all Amestrians are the same. So what use would there be in leaving someone alive who could provide useful information? It's not like anyone in Amestris will help. Besides, Scar thinks he already knows the extent of the crimes committed against his people in Ishval. What more could there be for him to learn? In Scar's mind, Amestrians are the villains, and Ishvalans are the victims. And that's that. There's no point discussing or considering this situation further. Of course, even if Ishvalans are victims, not all Amestrians are villains. In fact, many Amestrians are victims themselves. Ed talks about how Rezimbol got destroyed because of the war, and says it might have been a bustling city if the government had been more on top of things. Later, a group of Ishvalans in the desert attack Ed, and it's only thanks to the kindness of one of the elders that he doesn't have to fight them or get hurt himself. Like Scar, these Ishvalans are full of hate, and they're one step away from becoming assailants themselves. Winry's life is particularly shaped by the war. After all, her parents died treating Ishvalans. She was left as an orphan at a young age, regardless of the fact that she and her parents didn't do anything wrong. Based on this alone, Scar's worldview and understanding of other people is fundamentally flawed. But Winry isn't just a victim of the war. She's specifically a victim of Scar. Because after waking up with his brother's arm, Scar killed them in a fit of rage and confusion. In particular, I love the way Brotherhood frames this scene. All the color is drained from the world except one: blue. The blue of the Rockbell's eyes. The message is clear. Scar doesn't view them as individuals. He views them as Amestrians, as people who've committed sins against his people. However, even when Scar faces this mistake, even when he faces Winry, he hardly backs down. He places the blame on Amestris, telling Winry and Ed that their people were the first ones to pull the trigger. He claims that the only way to stop the cycle of hatred is to destroy both sides. Even this confrontation doesn't change the pure hatred for Amestrians he has inside him. Instead, it's Winry's and Ed's response that gets him to doubt himself even a little bit. For a moment, as Ed protects Winry, he's able to see a connection. In their place, he sees himself and his brother, but now the roles have been reversed. He's the attacker, and they're his victims. Now he's like Kimblee, a man who's convinced himself that it's his job to carry out this task, to commit acts of violence against other people. Earlier on, when Ed was attacked by Ishvalans, the Elder there didn't want to hurt Ed for one simple reason. She knew that all Amestrians aren't the same. Later on, Ed builds upon this when he tells Miles that if they deal with one another as individuals, then it's possible to treat each other as equals. And this is what Scar is able to do here. For a moment, he sees past his assumptions, and he's able to see Ed and Winry as individuals. Now they aren't just a state alchemist and an Amestrian girl. Even they, with their different appearances and backgrounds, can connect with his and his brother's individual experiences. He comes to realize that it's not the things you're born with that truly define you, it's your actions. From here, what had previously been a quest to deconstruct Amestris itself instead becomes a quest for Scar to deconstruct the reasoning behind his own actions and feelings. From there, many of Scar's worldviews are challenged, including some of the views he had even before the war. He sees that alchemy can be used for good and that there's many different types of alchemy. He interacts with people of all sorts of different cultures and backgrounds, finds points of connection with them, and bands together with them in pursuit of a common goal. This way, Winry isn't the only one that challenges Scar and helps him change. No, his change stems from his interactions with many people who have chosen different paths than his. To me, the most powerful of these is Miles, an Ishvalan man who's part of the Amestrian military stationed in Briggs. Through him, Scar is able to specifically see how another Ishvalan is managing to fight back against prejudice in a different way. He's able to see that despite the anger and pain that Miles experiences, he's managed to choose a better path. He may be trying to deconstruct certain pieces of the system, but he's also building up something else in its place, changing how things have worked before and how they will work in the future. He may be learning from the past and still suffering, but he's also looking forward. Before, Scar's alchemy stopped at deconstruction, just as his worldview did. He understood that something was incredibly wrong with the world, but he had no plans for how to positively change it. This hopelessness led him to even try and murder Ed, a child, because he was a state alchemist. But once he learns the final step, the step of reconstruction, he's able to move forward as a beacon for positive change in the world. In the end, despite all the horrible things he's done, he plays an instrumental part in breaking down this cycle of hatred, and of creating a new cycle from there. In a way, Winry's parents' actions during the war are at the center of Fullmetal Alchemist. I understand that at first that might seem strange, though. After all, even though they treated Ishvalans, most were still murdered or left without a home. Besides, some people they treated didn't want anything to do with them. In the end, they were killed by one of the people they treated, and even if that hadn't happened, they would have been murdered by Kimblee. However, these actions create ripples. They create avenues for understanding one another. They create a connection across cultures and other dividing lines. They create a positive flow. Winry's parents' actions embody this idea that Scar's brother espouses. All these tiny parts come together to form the great flow that makes up the world. So if negative feelings pervade our world, then the flow of the rest of the world will become negative. However, positive actions work the same way, leading to a positive flow that results in the world becoming more, well, positive. This is also related to Mustang's ideals. He sees that the strength of one person is limited, but he understands that he can still protect what he can, and in turn, those people will protect those below them. Again, small actions create ripples, and those ripples create more ripples. Eventually, all this can add up to become a wave, resulting in a massive overhaul of the world, and turning a negative flow into a positive one. The idea of everyone being part of a great flow also points to a general theme of the importance of connection between people and cultures. Through Scar, we've already looked at the importance of that, but this extends further to alchemy in general. After all, by researching the alchemy of both Amestris and Shing, Scar's brother is able to design his own transmutation circle that will neutralize Father's nationwide transmutation circle. Here, Scar's brother is able to combine cultural perspectives and knowledge to save everyone. Beyond that, without Al, Dr. Marco, May, and Scar working together, his notes may have never been deciphered. Again, many types of knowledge from many different people are necessary. Without all these positions and perspectives, without the cooperation of the Ishvalan people, the souls inside Hohenheim, and many members of the Amestrian military, Father would have won. Without these actions, without this connection, the one would have consumed the all. Individuality, one of the very things that allowed such knowledge to flourish, would be wiped out. Positive flow. That's what this all comes down to. Because the Ishvalan elder lets Ed go, he learns what Scar did. Because Scar is confronted by his past, he joins forces with people he had once vowed to kill. Because he joins up with them, he's able to play a part in deciphering his brother's notes. And I could go on and on. Each positive action in turn leads to another positive action. This way, Fullmetal Alchemist sends a clear message. Every positive action, no matter how fruitless it may seem, can have a far greater impact than we'd initially imagined. At times, this cycle of hatred may seem too powerful to break, but there's always something that can be done. Every little action adds up. Through that, a cycle of hatred can be comprehended, deconstructed, and reconstructed into something different, into a cycle of hope, a cycle of understanding, a cycle of kindness. At first, such a task may seem too daunting for a single human to pull off, and that's because it is. But even ordinary humans can band together to do something amazing, and can affect each other's lives in fantastic ways.